morning. I know it's a bit different not being in person, so thanks for embracing the Zoom catch up with us. Now, I wanted to just touch on from the outset how business design's really impacted me over the last couple of months on my journey at Flight Centre, pun intended. So the COVID, it's hit quite a few industries really heavily, some more than others. So I know it's impacted a lot of people on a personal level from reduced income, particularly in the retail sector and hospitality, and they're low income earners. So there's been a lot of change in policy and in government around that. So there's had to be a lot of rapid social constructs to adapt as well. So with remote working, and also, yeah, some of the industries that have been impacted really differently. When I was chatting to some people recently around the share market, so a friend of mine works in a company that monitors shares, and that's been hit in a quite different way to what we've been hit in the travel industry. But it's leaving whole industries and people's lives in tatters. And I guess there's a domino effect from the supply chains of these companies as well. So it's not just the direct impact, there's a lot of subsidiary impacts. So this is such a brilliant use case for, or so many different use cases for where business design, having integrated design and looking at that whole picture right from start to end, but not just within your company, with everyone that touches any value creation or any impacts to that whole experience. So it's really been an eye opener for me, and I just wanted to share with you what's happened at Flight Centre. So there were a number of store closures and a significant amount of staff reduction released in the media. They already had quite a large retail footprint, so this has kind of been a catalyst for change, which is really exciting in the space that I work in there. So we've had a big impact in how many people we've had to refund whole holidays for. And it's not because they act as a broker. It's not just that you press some magic button and the refund pops out. You've got to contact each of the suppliers, and they've each got their own policies, which so they've all got their own complexity. So everyone in that whole supply chain is impacted, and you've got to apply different rules for how you cancel, refund, or change that booking. And we don't know what the future is, so we've had to adapt within a big amount of uncertainty, because we don't know if or when we can rebook some of those components of the holidays, or if the customers even want to still go on that holiday. So there's this whole risk aspect to what does a safe holiday look like now, and when are they going to open the borders? So it's not just a desire of wanting to go on a holiday. There's a whole aspect, a whole different facet of complexity that we've now got to compensate for within travel, around risk rating and understanding, is it safe for people to go to that area, and what's the risk of supplier insolvency. So that we've been investing in a lot of, and by investing I mean our time. We've done a lot with not much money or no money in some instances to be able to use automation and integration and better use of the data that we do have to be able to uplift that customer experience for the supplier cancellations and refunds or credits that are issued, so that when people when the borders are open and ready to rebook, that's not been a catastrophic experience for everyone. So we've been using, and there's been decisions that people have to make on the fly because you don't know all the information, and then you need to adapt, so that whole test and learn. So we've been standing up a lot of solutions and proving or disproving assumptions as we go, and it's really shown a great use case of making a decision to solve a pain point versus actually looking at this holistically. So we've had to react in some instances, and then we say, actually, we can go back with data and have a look and say, actually, we haven't looked at this as a whole system, and really be able to uplift, challenge some of the decisions, or uplift how we actually look at it holistically. So I know firsthand from seeing the media that there's things that Flight Centre didn't get right, And it's been really good to be able to be involved in that after the fact, to come in and look at that. So people wouldn't naturally think to go, right, I'm going to go to the enterprise architecture team, because there's still a preconception that that's IT solutions and that you're just delivering on preset requirements. But it's really understanding, actually, we're business designers in this space, and we're partnering with you to help you understand the whole system and complexity within that, as well as the customer space. So we've been working really closely in a cross-functional team across the whole business, front, back and middle office, and closer with the customer experience team and the user experience people, and the heroes of the day, our data and integration guys. So yeah, we stood up a Salesforce org within 2 months and 1 day from when I scratched out a plan to when we actually deployed it, and we've got all of Australia on there. So a case management tool to be able to manage refunds and be able to audit and automate. So we've gone from having a huge backlog to clearing that backlog within half of the backlog within 5 days of deployment, a backlog that had accumulated for 2.5 months. So that's the kind of benefit that you can get when you're when a company's on fire, or a whole industry is on fire, and there's so much complexity around, and to be able to react, have a common goal that is our customers. I mean, we had customers abroad that we had to repatriate. You know, this. So when you put that human aspect on, and then the emotive connection that people have got, and I've only worked there for 6 months, but other people have worked there their entire career. Or, you know, for quite a significant number of years. So they're very passionate about the culture and the company. So I just wanted to share that when you can connect to something higher than your team or your business unit or your cost center or your discipline. And I love the term that was used, Peter had mentioned last time, the discipline bigotry. So when you can lift outside of that and just focus on the value that you need to create, the politics can go out the window and you can just move mountains. So I'm really proud to share that story with you. So onto the presentation. So I'll run through the agenda. So I'll run through the welcome, which I think I've just done. We're going to hear from Christine. She's going to talk about the concept from last time. We did an activity, so we were asking about different subject matters that you'd like to know about. Then we're going to hear from Andrew around strategic alignment for go-to-market. And then we'll be looking to understand what do we want to talk about next, and then understand who do we want to hear from. So what kind of topics do we really want to target, and then we'll wrap up and close. So I'm really excited that everyone got out of bed and was able to be here. I think it's really important in these uncertain times that people have got a network to call on. I know myself, I'm quite an extrovert, so I found it really exciting being at home for a while, but then it gets a bit tedious after a while. So it's really great to be able to have this network to be able to bounce ideas off, and also just to share and build something out rather than just operate in my little bubble. So I'm really grateful that everyone could be here. So over to Christine to talk about last meeting.
Cool, thanks Heidi. So this is our third event, Heidi. I know in all your busyness, that was at the height of, probably your disaster.
Yes.
At Flight Center. So at the first session, we actually had our launch and our face-to-face, where we spent some time with everybody to get a list of what is it that you want to learn and take away from this group. And also, what is it that you would like to share with this group? So which is why today we are very lucky to have Andrew sharing his version of strategy on a page and line of sight. At the last session, I presented on how to deliver human-centered enterprise architecture. You know, in reality, a lot of enterprise architecture practices are failing today because they don't appreciate the fact that when all said and done, we are actually delivering our services to people. So that presentation is available on our Business Designers for Tomorrow LinkedIn group. So feel free to go through. Unfortunately, I was so excited and didn't remember to record it, but I have made those slides available if you are interested in having a look at my interpretation of how to do human-centered enterprise architecture. You're more than welcome to even share those slides with other people, and also encourage them to come and join us when we have these sessions. They're held every 2 months on the second Wednesday of every month. So feel free to download the presentation and share it around. That's it from me, Heidi.
Great, thanks, Christine. So we'll go to Andrew to talk through the strategic alignment. So I'm just going to stop sharing and introduce you properly, Andrew. And then you can go to your slides.
Can you bring that up? You can see that?
Let me see. Yes. So I'll
all right. So thank you, Heidi, Nigel, and Christine for the opportunity to present today. I think, yeah, we're in heightened times, as Heidi alluded to, and so this is sort of a segue from the conversation we had at our last meeting about the things that you'd like to hear about. And I presented this first in 2017 at the World Architecture Summit in Sydney, and yeah, got some really good input and feedback around the holistic nature of our enterprises and what's real and what's possible. And so, yeah, I thought it'd be worthwhile opportunity to walk through some of those slides that are really, yeah, really pertinent for us. And there's a real sense of flavour around how organisations respond. So what I'll do today is really just take you through for the next 30 odd minutes. I'll talk about some of the strategy assumptions. And yeah, I've been working at 35 different companies across 7 different industries. There's a lot of insights to be generated and trying to encapsulate those down onto one page. But I've been able to sort of bring to life some of those assumptions, and you'll see some relevance to your existing environments. I'll talk about the linkages between business and technology strategy relevant to performance, and certainly when you insert COVID into the environment, it forces a whole new range of responses and brings people together and does cut through a lot of noise and a lot of organisational stories. So. And bringing people together. What I'll then do is I'll talk to a particular model or a view that I've been able to create that, yeah, it's not 100% accurate. It doesn't have everything that you expect to find in there. It's a starting point. It's a lens into your organisation. So I'll talk about that. I'll then talk about how we use that model and that view to look at an environment. So it's really the lens into how the organisation is structured, what's important to them, how the executives see their organisation, and how they respond to their market as well. And then we'll talk about, we'll have some questions on the way as well. So I will highlight, so in the chat for this particular meeting, if you could add any questions you've got, I'll stop midway and we can just answer any of those as we go along. So feel free to jump into the chat, and we'll certainly have a question and answer at the end. So I guess my intention for today is really to provide you with a view to support your stakeholder engagement and conversation. So as Heidi mentioned, the world is about people. The models are just a view, just a reference point around how your people come together to deliver company outcomes. So what I hope to do today is just help with some of your libraries, some of the conversations you're having. And so if you can get a sense from that view that creating line of sight of what's happening in your organization is critical to help you deliver on your business strategy and help you drive the execution adjustments, help you fine tune and optimize what's going on, help you take away the red projects that are sitting in your environment, so to speak. So I'll work through that and certainly drop any questions you've got. And it's being recorded and will be dropped onto the LinkedIn site today as well. So I'll quickly just go through a couple of key findings, and this is really just a summary of some of the things that I've found over the years. every organisation and business, and this ranges from the small business all the way up to the multinationals, that there's a number of uncertainties, complexities, disconnects, gaps, waste resources, dilution of value. There's a lot that needs to go right for a company to really optimize its investments, optimize its engagement with customers, optimize its revenue and cost outcomes. So just recognizing that is a starting point for a lot of people. It's what's happening underneath the covers in terms of people's ecosystems. Unless they've got direct visibility, unless they've got some reference point around that, a lot of it can be noise, a lot of it can be just hearsay, depending on who's in front of them at the time. So, and that's where I think things like the models are really powerful for bringing to life what's real in an organisation. Another point I'll make is CEOs and executive team, board directors, business owners responsible for generating some level of line of sight or understanding what's happening in their business. And all employees have a role in engaging with that organisational story. In many cases, that accountability responsibility is not altogether landed as well. So one of the things, the opportunities we have as architects and business designers, so to speak, is to bring that line of sight story to our executives so they can get a sense of what's working, what's not, where the opportunities are, what do the roadmap look like, how might we go forward in our activities. And I think one of the critical things around line of sight and go to market, they're critical inputs no matter what size of business you've got. If you understand what's happening in your business, you know where the levers are, where the strengths are, where the gaps, the disconnects are, you know what's working when you go to market. And I think Heidi mentioned Flight Centre, where they've had a significant outperformance over the years because of a strong visibility and focus on their sweet spots and their patterns, their ability to go to market. And so all of a sudden, retail space, all of a sudden, commercial property is not the biggest game in town. It's not the biggest channel. It's becoming a long last in terms of how you go to market. So those sort of adjustments or changes rely on you understanding what have you got, how do you adjust, you go to market, how do you adjust the channels that you engage your customers with. I think the organisations that have been able to generate outperformance are those that have got the strong alignment between their strategy, their capability, and the go-to-market opportunities that are in play. Those companies, and you have a look at the companies on share markets, the FANG companies, the Facebooks, the Amazons, have a really strong sweet spot, have a really strong set of patterns, supply chain that works, and they drive that and optimize that. And that's where they've got a strong sense of that line of sight of what's happening in that supply chain, and they run it really hard, run that one pattern really hard, and that generates outperformance. So you can get a sense of those companies that have got big legacy systems and big legacy offices and commercial property, things like that. They're the ones that are going to have fairly significant adjustments to be able to optimize their go-to-market. So there's some great opportunities in the COVID's being able to present. So I think one of the things that also came out is that organizations are made up of a number of different assets or domains. And so customers and people are so critical. And you can't just assume that everyone's on side, everyone understands the strategy, it takes things like COVID to bring everybody together kind of scenario. So, but there are business processes, their data, their application, the infrastructure that all need to be visible and actively managed. And so you can imagine the Salesforce example that Heidi used, that all of these different components need to come together really quickly and generate an outcome really quickly. So if you don't have visibility, you don't know who the right people are, you don't know what processes need to be created, where the data is going to come from, what application you're going to use, or what platforms are going to in play, how you're going to host it. If you don't have that strength of visibility, then it's very hard to actively respond. And that's where people talk about the organizational resilience, is if you've got that visibility, that strength of line of sight to those asset profiles, then you can actively manage and leverage them to generate great outcomes. And I guess respond really quickly, which is one of the best benefits around that. And I guess I've often used, and I've got a company called On a Page, you'll notice that branding there, but essentially the rowing 8 analogy, where you can imagine the boat has 8 executives from your company, all sitting in that boat, all trying to get that boat to go as fast as it can, win the race against its competitors. There's things like technique, there's things like timing, there's things like sweet spots and patterns. There's things like where do you place certain executives for their skill sets in the roles to get the best outcome for the boat. And so companies are very similar. It's really trying to get all of those resources, all those different domains together to work to operate as one. And it's not always the case, but the boats that certainly get those elements together and have them in alignment generate the best outcomes, go the fastest, and generate outperformance. And you can see that through some of the stock market performances as well. So that's a base level of assumptions around where we get to from a strategy and what we need to manage. There's, I guess, through all the different companies being involved in, they've all got different aspirations and goals. They're all out there trying to drive a vision with a set of goals that, and this applies to the small business owner who wants to retire, to the company that wants to double their profit, the company that wants to be customer focused, more efficient, double revenues, commercially focused, digital, agile, those sorts of things. I think there's no lack of aspirations and goals. It's, I guess they're really setting the hooks for what's important to the company. And so recognizing that companies have those goals is a good thing. I'll talk a little bit more about how executives come gather around those goals shortly. But essentially there's, a lot of opportunities and really, I guess the smaller number of goals, the more simple the hooks and more focus you can generate. So the problem being is that a lot of companies face some significant business and technology issues. And I think you'll probably be able to relate to some of these, whether it relates to your technology investments, whether it relates to your people, whether it relates to business behavior that is not altogether focused on the holistic outcome. You've got too many different systems in certain domains. You don't manage or engage your customers well. We spend way too much money on all the wrong outcomes. We don't spend enough on the outcomes that really matter. So there's a lot of different disciplines that come together that need to support generating those outcomes. So I guess what we're calling out here is, you've got a set of outcomes and objectives and aspirations and goals, but there's a lot of work to bring those together to be able to effectively generate those. As it is in a rowing 8, where you've got to bring all of those elements together. There's a lot to manage. And so what I've been able to do is sort of bring together a particular model of a lens into your business. And I think you can apply this to almost any environment you're in. There's not people represented here. There's not governance represented here, but it's essentially, those are the things that underpin all of these inputs. And essentially it's agnostic. It's really not designed to be, this is a definitive way, this is the only way. This is really just a guide. What I've been able to find of different use cases for the use of this model is just really having a conversation with executives, understanding what is their strategy, how have they structured the metrics and the measures around that, how are they using technology to uplift their capabilities, do they have an architecture framework? There's so many different questions. Where might their challenges be? Are they in business land? Are they in the data, accessibility, ability to access data? Do they have the right applications in place to support their processes? Do they have timely access through hosting and networks and security and things like that? And of course, we've now got the agile world where the combination of waterfall versus agile projects to drag an organization forward in a more active and agile dynamic way. And then we talk about the go-to-market scenarios. And so this is where, from a flight center perspective, where these sort of seismic events around COVID that have forced them to adjust the way they respond in their business. And so how they go to market is significant, and how they adjust their retail portfolio of properties is really significant. So you can see that there's a whole range of conversations that can be had in each of these domains that really try to help understand what's happening in the organization. You can relate this model to the whole of a company. You can relate this model to an organization, just a division, and this could be a business or a technology unit. It could be a small little team. You say, well, what is our strategy? Who are our customers? How are we delivering value? what are the inputs that we're generating to support that? So if I can go into the strategy framework and just really sort of call out some of the key insights around that. Often it's sort of interesting. There's been a whole gamut of experiences in the strategy space, business and technology space. And it's really interesting, I guess, dealing with executives who, if they can clearly articulate their strategy, it becomes a really good pinpoint that, yes, the CEO has a strong grip of what they're trying to achieve. I've been in environments where the CEO articulates that strategy, but the direct reports aren't able to clearly articulate that same strategy. They have a different interpretation, a different variation, or in some cases, they have a very different strategy to what the CEO is trying to generate. So the conversations in here are really quite critical. And I've been in environments also where the CEO is workshopped to death his immediate reports so that they can articulate clearly the business strategy that the CEO wants to deliver on behalf of the board. And so it's something that, because we're dealing with people business, you just can't take for granted that everyone clearly understands, clearly articulates, and clearly responds to the strategy as it's been stated. So there's a lot of learnings in the strategy space that, it's sort of, I think it's one of the critical outputs, the hooks that allow everyone else to jump onto and work out how they're responding to the business strategy as it's been articulated. I've used a big bubble in there around the capabilities model, and you relate to that as architects, where the capability model plays point guard to a lot of the other architecture inputs. And essentially, it's a really good point guard model for aligning technology and the business. And so, and it's also, enables us to deal with the business, the data, the applications, infrastructure inputs as well. So those capability models are really quite powerful for pivoting, realigning investment spends and things like that. We've then got the business or the technology change management and agile change management. This is where agile has become really quite pertinent over the last, I'll say, 12 to 24 months, where companies are endeavoring to become more dynamic, more agile, more responsive. They can't wait for small changes to be made. It's the business of today really does need to be able to respond. And you can see things like COVID, where the level of intensity and momentum around these changes has changed significantly. So, and I think some companies have been really quite slow to adopt and adapt to the agile space. But there's really a strong case now for, rather than it being just 20 or 30% of your total portfolio delivery, that you can really start, if you've got strong visibility to your key assets, then you're able to become a lot more agile, because you can assess the impact, you understand the risk, you've got the right people in play, you get the rhythms and things like that. So the mix between the old waterfall and major projects versus agile is really changing really quite significantly. So recognizing that those are the key delivery mechanisms for uplifting in your capabilities, changing your environments, really bringing to life the various sweet spots and patterns that are in your business. And I'll talk about the architecture framework. This is literally a 4x3 kind of representation. It's somewhere between Zachman, somewhere between TOGAF, somewhere between PF and DODAF, and it's not designed to supersede, overlap, really just trying to simplify those various methods and frameworks. And so really all it does is call out that our worlds are made up of business architecture, data, applications, infrastructure. They're all very pertinent domains, very pertinent series of assets that need to be managed. I guess conceptually, tactically, and operationally. There's a real run kind of scenarios in the operations and physical space. There's a real need to have a level of strategy. Well, how are we going to manage our business and design our business? The series of value chains, a series of core processes that deliver our sweet spots. There's a whole range of questions in each of those four domains that, do we have a grip on what's the data that's really important to our business? If we know we've got an enterprise information model, then what does that mean for the data that we manage? Where does that sit? Who owns it? How do we govern it? And especially around the applications portfolio. I've seen lots of environments that run off the back of an Excel spreadsheet. A lot of environments run off the back of poorly designed, multiple functions or single functions in multiple different platforms. Really, there's a strong case to be able to manage your platform holistically and I guess minimize the number of Excel spreadsheets that are in your environment. Having Excel spreadsheets in your environment is a real sure sign that your application portfolio is not meeting the needs of the business. Yeah. So it's a really good insight. And of course, there's a whole new world of infrastructure around hosting and cloud and how that comes together to support business become more agile. So you can imagine all of these different components need to come together, have a series of projects that are impacting on them. How does all that get to deliver on your strategy? And so you can imagine there's so many levers here that need to be managed and understood by executives. And so by simply using this model as a bit of a lens, you can work with the conversation with your executives as to can they clearly articulate their strategy? Do they know how their business is structured? Do they know what data is important? Do they know their application portfolio is fit for purpose? What projects have they got running for their next FY21, FY22? Will that fill the gaps? Will that add more complexity? Have they got the right projects in agile land that will be able to increase the capability they've got? There are just so many questions that you can ask off the back of this simple one-page model. And I mentioned the go-to-market scenarios as well. It's something that I think keeps executives up at night about how they go to market and what's happening with their customer base. And there's a significant range of opportunities to redefine how companies go to market. It's been forced on them whether they like it or not. So very simple sort of representation of your organisation. And I guess what you can also get a sense of, well, what value can I add? What value can I offer? Where are the gaps with a particular executive or a particular business unit or in a company? And so those gaps are the ones that really start to focus where you want to spend your funding, what views, what models you need to create to provide that visibility. So there's a lot of different questions that really come out of this one particular model. And so I guess the use of governance now has really taken a whole new level of significance. And thank you, Christine, for this model. This is really powerful for driving out a fit-for-purpose governance response to make it real. And so what's really, governance has taken on so much different perspective now, certainly in a virtual world, because there's elements of engagement, there's elements of collaboration, there's elements of accountability, getting your sponsors on the hook, getting them together to bring people together to make decisions. And also, those decisions that need to be made around, key standards and how you want to run your business, where the priorities are, and how you adjust spending and things like that. So the way that the model is sort of structured, is 3 layers of governance. And really governance is you can even use that line of sight model to plot where your governance forums are and what's important to the organization and where the gaps are as well. So, but often using governance to fill a lot of those gaps, bringing people together to agree. But at the enterprise governance level, you can use governance to monitor your funding, monitor your strategy, engage your stakeholders. There's so many, you can use the enterprise level governance to manage the application portfolio, to manage your business architecture, make sure the design is fit for purpose. What adjustments are we making this quarter, kind of scenario. So it's really become a really critical level of governance to be able to drive out that holistic enterprise response and make the adjustments that are needed to support performance. Then there's a program level of governance, which is really about, well, you've got all these different investments around programs, projects, and are you really generating the best outcomes, the best value, the best benefits from that investment spend? And things change quite regularly. So it's not a set and forget kind of scenario around these investments. Those companies that have regular governance and regularly interrogate their spend as to its fit for purpose, is it generating the outcomes, what are the dependencies and risk around all those? That's where the critical part of program governance can really come to life. And then we've got the SAF, which is the new Agile framework governance. This is where, the emerging world of Agile delivery, where Every project has a series of epic stories, features, sprints, squads, scrums. There's a whole new language that is coming to life in organisations now that certainly need a level of governance that obviously you don't want to be generating more complexity, more spaghetti. So there's a real level of, yes, we'll allow certain agile in that particular domain because the value statement is significant, rather than we're just going to do agile for everybody kind of thing. So you really start to get really quite specific about what areas of the agile portfolio do you want to govern and have strong level of visibility to, versus we're happy to let things run at a lot faster speed in terms of the configuration and changes and adjustments. So yeah, really quite powerful. The line of sight model I had before is underpinned by people and governance. It really is a strong barometer as to how well your company comes together around the strategic outcomes. Have we got any other questions, Christine, that have come through at this stage?
Yes, we do, Andrew. Nigel and I both had the same question on your the slide where you had the rowing boat. The question was, in a lot of organizations, the challenge is having all the executives to pull in the same direction so that we can achieve the outcome. How do you actually convince them that they need to collaborate instead of selfishly thinking about the silos that they head up and are only really interested in their own KPIs?
Yeah, and it's a really great question, and there's a whole bunch of dimensions to that. I think elements around organizational culture and how people communicate and how much engaged they are. If people are a highly engaged group, so those engagement scores are really quite critical for understanding the level of engagement of your teams. And so literally the leadership and the coaching aspects in that space are really quite critical as well. And so that's where the CEO, I talked about the CEO taking accountability for that line of sight. And, if they have strategy and directives that they bring to the business, then they really need to be sure that the people that are receiving that directive have a strong understanding, are able to articulate and replay back that strategy, and their responses are in line with that strategy as well. So there's a number of different ways that the leadership group can, a really series of workshops. That's why we have workshops, is to bring people together, to have the conversations, to ensure that the language is clear, the understanding the sweet spots and the patterns. And so I think, it's really quite pertinent on that leadership group to show that leadership around collaboration and participate and drive the sponsorship of key programs. And it's a constantly moving feast. It's not something that you do a strategy workshop in January and expect by June that everyone's running off the same model. We are all humans, and so there's a lot to be said for the rhythms of communication and governance and collaboration to bring to life an organisation's strategy and their outcomes. So I don't think there's one answer to all that, but hopefully I've been able to cover a number of the different inputs. We are all in people businesses, so we definitely need to be mindful of that when we're engaging our various executives and stakeholder groups.
Now, that's good, Andrew. If I can just add to that, and something that Heidi touched upon in her experience with Flight Centre. The reason why Flight Centre was able to move at that speed is because of that cross-functional, or what I call a multidisciplinary team, recognizing the need to come together. But the biggest challenge I've seen in a lot of organizations is that this reluctance, and again, something Heidi mentioned, was discipline bigotry. And I see a lot of that in organizations that I work in, that at the moment, the flavor of the month is agile, and agile will run everything in the organization, but not understanding where the SAFe framework actually fits causes a lot of those problems and puts those discipline bigotry barriers up that actually holds the formation of that multidisciplinary team and that ability to work together. In my mind our future would be great if we had, our executives incentivized by having a KPI that encourages multidisciplinary teams to work together to solve problems and not wait for a crisis to make that happen.
Yeah, it's a really good point. It's often the running joke is that what's driving the digital strategy at the moment, and it's COVID. It's not CIO or CEO, but it's COVID is forcing people together to break down those barriers. And I think I talked about the line of sight. You're right. You've got all these different perspectives at all these different levels of detail, whether it's technology, business, strategy, even those in the run teams that need to come together to help make this work. It's there's so many different perspectives, and it's if you get enough people, critical mass of people through your governance layer to come together and agree on the path forward, then you stand a chance. But not just using COVID as the excuse or the driver. It should be become a normal part of your how you go, how you run your business. So there's a lot more dimensions to it. So excellent, thank you. Is there any other questions?
Yes, we do. Keith has just sent a question in. Do you think this is an opportunity for organizations to remove the traditional silo mentality, which the fear of COVID has temporarily removed as leadership has struggled with the unknowns? There is a sense of do whatever it takes across the organization.
I think, there's a lot of seismic activity going on in companies at the moment. And I think you're absolutely right, Keith. It's a really powerful driver. It's taken a whole of society pandemic to drive out those adjustments, to force people, rattle cages, force people to think, this is not just me now. It's not just my division. It's not just this team. It's or this project. It's actually now how do we contribute, because companies are now some of them are literally on the edge in terms of survival or not. Those that will adapt, those that do adapt will be the survivors and come out a lot stronger. And so those that still want to sit back and sit on their heels and say, it's not my job, not my responsibility, I don't have to deal with that, they're the ones that are really going to suffer. And so anytime you come into that sort of conversation in your organizations, it's a red flag for engaging in the broader, wider opportunity that being presented by your company. So really great question. And I think it's going to take a while. It's not 3 months. I think this is a 12 to 24 month readjustment of priorities, readjustment of perspectives, how we lead, how we communicate, how we collaborate. There's some fairly significant changes happening within companies as we speak. So it's forcing people together. It's forcing teams to come to life in a far more holistic response to their environment. So I think there's lots of good things around it, lots of not so good things, but I think your question is really, really relevant. Thanks, Keith.
Okay, I don't have any more questions in the chat window, but if anyone else wants to jump in, just take yourself off mute.
So Christine, I just wanted to jump in. So I actually worked I was working in London across a few different banks, investment and retail banks through the GFC. So I've kind of had a run through this kind of feel, in the eye of the storm before. And yes, there's a point in time where the silo thinking and mentality does go out the window, but then when things start to stabilize and there's some certainty, you're always going to, it depends on the personality types that you've got in the organisation. There's always going to be a scarcity mindset when there's a reduction in resources, and until there's an abundance mindset at that organisation, you're going to have people looking to re-establish different turf lines and those kinds of things. So having been through something like this before elsewhere at a few different organisations that were experiencing real hardship, that had a really good run for quite a long time, it's a matter of time before the pendulum swings back the other way. So you need to change your KPIs, I think, in a significant way, to be able to put anything in that lasts. So you can have an essence of it, but I haven't seen it yet through the GFC.
It's a really good point. Going back to 9/11, GFC, pandemic. What's the next one coming along? It's a rebaselining, a recalibration, and an opportunity as well. And those companies that come out at the end of those are the ones that are, have adapted and adopted, things like agile, strong collaboration, strong engagement, and I've got everyone on the boat rowing in the same direction at the same time with the same set of outcomes. So, yeah, really good point. Thanks, Heidi. Is there anyone else that wants to make a comment? I'll keep going. No, all goodness. Excellent. Thank you for that. So, I guess just recalibrating then why you might do line of sight. Why is it really critical? And I guess for yourself, for your executives, for your teams, for your CEO, basically generating insight and adds value to your business and technology decision making. The quicker, the faster that oxygen of insight and data that comes to life about what's going on in your business, what's happening with your metrics, what's happening with your customers, what's happening with suppliers, the quicker that momentum, that velocity of insight that comes to you, the better off. And in your own personal world, the amount of messages you get in social media, across all forms of news bulletins, across the areas of interest that you have, we're having to become so adept at managing so many different information sources now. So, but getting information to the right on the right metrics and the right outcomes is still really critical. And so, understanding what those inputs are, where that data sits, what systems it in, who's managing it, are really critical. And so, having that information is one thing. Being able to have clear trade-off decisions to govern it and adjust on your journey is really critical as well. Things like the strategic choices you're making, setting up a Salesforce platform to handle claims as soon as possible. Really critical choice that you need to make within days, with a level of funding, sponsorship, and messages to bring these people together. You can imagine the velocity of all of that happening to generate an outcome in 2 months and 1 week kind of thing. It's really, those are things that might take a 6 or 12 month waterfall project to generate in a non-COVID environment, but you can see, you can get a sense that you can make some really strong decisions really quickly. And I guess the opportunity to bring that alignment within business units and within business and technology and customer expectations is really critical as well. And that talks to Christine's point about having all of your executives clearly articulate what the strategy is. It really, just bear with me, I'm just going to close that. And so, I turn off my notifications. It's really critical that you do have that alignment across business units and technology teams. And the stronger that alignment, the better off the decision-making processes are. And I think also there's an element of having a similar, consistent language. And this is where the value statement from an architect's perspective is really quite powerful, is that we can create some of those visual representations that bring business units together, that bring technology teams together, that bring projects together, understanding exactly what their scope and guardrails are, and enabling them to, creating the runway for them to deliver far more dynamic and far more, obviously quicker approach. And that actually allows Agile to be more successful as well. And I guess one of the things around generating line of sight is you can actually draw direct linkages to customer satisfaction, retention, acquisition, cross-sell, revenue, cost, and risk and compliance. These strategic hooks are now a lot closer to you if you've got a sense of what the inputs are through line of sight. So it's really powerful that you, in your role, you can actually bring to life an organizational metric and contribute directly to it. And I think really powerful around the line of sight is your sweet spots and repeatable patterns. I think I keep emphasizing the ecosystems of your organization, is that there are certain sweet spots and repeatable patterns that work really well. Amazon, Facebook, those, the big companies, Flight Centre, for example, really successful, having a small number of sweet spots that generate 60 to 70% of their outcomes, and they run and manage that sweet spot and pattern really powerfully and refine it so that it becomes a real engine room for those companies. So what I want to do is just jump into some case studies around using that model. And so it really just, I mentioned the lens into the organization, and So I've got a couple of examples. One is around an oil and gas company, which you can imagine who that might be, given who I work for at the moment. But there's also some other, I've got another example around a government department and how they set themselves up with the architecture inputs as well. So from the oil and gas company perspective, understanding what their strategy was, what their technology portfolio looked like, what level of agile projects they were delivering, and what were the various inputs using the architecture framework. A whole bunch of opportunities in this space. We knew they had a set of strategic objectives, so there was a strong sense of what those objectives were. We knew they had a business capability model, so they could use it in anger to play point guard in understanding what's happening in their business, where are they spending their money, where are they burning platforms, what's working well, what's not. It's a real barometer for what's happening and where their priorities are. They also had an enterprise process framework, so they got a sense of the value chains and the core processes that made up their business. It was not based on organisational chart. So it was designed to bring the different parts of the organisation together around core processes which focus on the customer and optimising their oil and gas assets and producing gas. So really quite powerful for breaking down the barriers across business units. They also had an enterprise information model which allowed them to understand, well, what data is important? We really want to make sure that our governance, that our master data, that our definitions of that data, our ownership of that data is really entrenched in the way we do business. And so if you don't have that level of accountability around data that's important, then you're allowing projects to really make the calls in their own domain to deliver the project, not to support the upstream, downstream impacts that are outside of that particular project. So they also had a series of logical information models. They had a series of project by project physical data models as well. So they had a real line of sight what's going on in their information space. They also had logical application models around the ecosystem. So they were able to bring to life how applications came together or didn't, what level of Excel spreadsheets are supporting mission critical processes. And so we all know the value of Excel spreadsheets and being able to quickly stand up some insights and reporting, but they're not really part of a scalable response to your business environment. It's the ability to manipulate data and make adjustments is just way too easy. So I guess they also had a project by project perspective around data as well. So they had core process landscape, and they had moving those core processes to a level 2 maturity of definitions. So there's some really strong inputs from an architecture perspective. And I guess they also had, in that space, they had a technology strategy that enabled visibility to the capabilities and the business strategy. And they were also able to incorporate the 4 domains of business, data, applications, infrastructure, how they're going to manage them, what are the principles around that, and what are the reference points that they can use in anger, and what that was going to mean for their strategy over the next 3 years. So you can get a sense of really what's in play, what's not. With this kind of model, you can model the governance as well. So you can see, well, we're governing our funding, we're governing our strategy, we're governing our data, we're governing our business architecture. They had an enterprise process framework working group of senior executives who came together. So you get a sense of what's really important from a governance perspective as well. So really powerful sort of representation of what's happening in your organisation, where the visibility is. You can see there's not a lot of governance in the infrastructure space. So an opportunity to, is it putting spaghetti in the cloud, or do we actually put those applications in the cloud that make sense? So, and we still need to integrate a lot of those applications in the cloud, even though they're in a different hosting environment. So a whole bunch of issues and challenges that sort of come to life in that. So you get a sense of, and in that agile space, the go-to-market space, there's some level of business working groups coming together around go-to-market. Agile is still a very much an evolving practice within the organisation. So there's still not a lot of governance and reference points around the use of Agile and the rationale for it. So there's some great opportunities to to embed some level of agile governance into this particular environment. So that was an oil and gas company that you can use that line of sight model. But I can go into the government directory and just give you a different flavour and different perspective in a government space. So using the same model. And so literally taking this view of the world and going, well, what's happening in my company? How can I be an entrepreneur? How can I bring to life insights and reference points to help my executives generate better decisions, better outcomes? There's a whole raft of value opportunities using a lens like this in your organisation. And so in the government space, they had a set of strategic objectives. They had a capability model as well. They had an enterprise information model, so they really had a strong sense of what was important from a data perspective. They had that strength in the information management space, which was great. And so recognising, a little bit of my sweet spot is obviously in information management as well. So having strength in that space is really critical driver to how the organisation makes decisions and generates insight. They were a little bit limited in the way they managed their applications. So essentially they left it to projects to do their own market scans, do their own RFPs, and literally best of breed. And often you can gold plate your application portfolio, but really spending a lot more money than you need to unless you're actively managing your application portfolio holistically. So that project by project perspective was sort of, you've actually diverted all of the management of your application down to the project level. And so you get a sense that the projects are there to help, by deliver an outcome, within cost, within time, budget scenarios. So with a scope that makes sense. So very different objective to the whole of organisation. We need to build this capability, address this burning platform, glue up this group of business functions, better manage this data kind of thing. So you get a sense of, in a project perspective where those objectives can be somewhat diluted by the time you get to project land. So, and obviously they had an unknown process landscape. So business units were left to run their own environment, and it actively promoted the silos because there was no clear line of sight in their process land about how they generate value and how they deliver value to customers. So I think to Christine's point earlier on around that level of alignment, it's having visibility that business architecture space, design-based thinking is really powerful for bringing business units together around your strategic objectives. So, and obviously they had an IT strategy as well that brought the business strategy to life. And so certainly, there were some great opportunities around generating that alignment and bringing technology to the business. Ideally, a real hand-in-glove kind of response. Often it's not. And so, there's often some challenges in that space around making sure that IT are building out that technology environment to support the business. So, but again, the business is really not clearly aligned either. So you can see from a technology perspective the difficulties they've got in trying to align the business around single outcomes. So that's really I guess there's two case studies. I think if you can take this model and really just answer some of the key questions about your environment. Is the strategy clear? Do we have a strong sense of visibility around the portfolio? Is it generating the outcomes we're looking for? Do we actively manage our applications? Do we know what data is important? Are our business processes clear? There's just lots of questions that can be generated off this one-page representation.
Andrew, we've got a question.
Yeah, sure.
From Lucy. She'd like to know whether there are situations where the various assets framework strategies contradict each other, and how can these be identified and then realigned?
Yeah, I guess looking at a particular environment around asset management, and again, it's really depending on is the business aligned around asset management, how they want to manage assets for the business. If they can't answer those questions, then you're guaranteed to have many different perspectives, many different standards in place. I can give you a case study around this government directorate. They had 7 different information management frameworks. They had people talking at each other, through each other, occasionally aligned, and then missing each other completely in language and definitions and principles and approach. So I think really if you can elevate asset management to the executive suite and have the executive sponsorship, then you stand a chance of landing, consolidating, bringing a single reference point to life around how you manage your assets, and therefore the things can flow, that the definitions, the principles, the reference architectures around that, the processes that support it, the technical advisory councils that come into play around asset management as well, making sure that they're all running off the same song sheet. And so it's very much building a house, understanding the visibility of what's at the top, getting the right sponsorship in play. I think they're critical parts to bringing the organisation together around a single response to asset management. So,
if I can add to that, Andrew, obviously a tool can help maintain that alignment as well. If you have your own architecture repository meta model set up, it helps you by default maintain that alignment. So that's one way of creating that alignment. But more a comment I was going to make is quite often architects get paralyzed in thinking that I've got to go and create and develop all of these models for my project. But the way you've laid it out in terms of, your conceptual, tactical, and operational view, there is a way in which we can start defining role-based architecture frameworks so that we can not only build that alignment in automatically and encourage it, but help the projects and the project architects develop the models that are relevant for their level or their layer, which in this case is the operations layer, and demonstrating how it feeds back and contributes to the overall enterprise alignment is hugely beneficial.
Yeah, it's really powerful, the beauty of those models to bring people together from a business and technology perspective around a particular domain. As Heidi alluded to early on, it's bringing people up out of their own little worlds, their own little priorities, what they're doing this week. And there is a bigger goal in play. They have people that are inputs into what they do, and what they create is outputs for others. So they're part of an ecosystem that needs to operate as smoothly, as seamlessly as possible, and the models can really fit that mold. And so you're right, every project doesn't need to define each and every model. They might have if they've already got some of these logical and conceptual representations in place, starting top down gives you a real strong sense of the value, the scope, the risk, the dependencies, what stakeholders, what people do I need to engage. It basically answers all those questions you need answered for your particular project. So you just got a stronger sense of, so you're actually delivering your project by design. So, which is a really powerful concept in its own right. So is there any other questions, Christine, at this stage?
None, but if anyone's got questions, if you want to unmute your mic and ask.
Yeah, I was just going to say, Andrew, that the just been working a lot in the space of digital strategies and digital business transformation lately, and I've found the IT strategy has become more like a operational planning type of thing. So it takes the digital strategy that includes a lot more around the business and the organizational change management, and then it breaks that down, and the IT strategy is really like, what are we doing? You're mentioning like the infrastructure space, moving to the cloud, getting off premise, and all those types of things, and implementing. So yeah, I'd just just the last couple of examples that I've had has really been around that digital strategy, driving the business change, and the business being able to really identify with the digital side of things, and how the business changes to it. So yeah.
Yeah,
So I guess the question there is, I guess, where would the digital strategy come? Would it be up in this space or this space? The IT strategy area or the strategic framework area. Yeah.
My personal opinion, it has to be in a strategy framework. It's a part of doing business for your company. It's not an add-on. It's not a if it's not driven by the CEO, then it will be driven by someone whose perspective is probably not the whole of organizations. So things, it's interesting because I guess if you put digital in the IT space, then it's primarily technology into the business. If you have a business executive, they get a chance to drive the technology requirements to support that technology strategy. You got the CEO, then he's directly attending the steering committee meeting to see if that digital strategy and the outcomes are generating the strategic outcomes he's looking for. So you get that different levels of sponsorship depending on where it lands, where that accountability lands in the organization. And I think also to Heidi's point early on, around the outside of this model is COVID, is people, is digital, is agile, is all these different flavors that are dragging the organization in different directions. And so I've seen organizations that are really grappling with the prioritization of what, do we just go digital? Is that the primary strategy for us to run with? Or do we get closer to our customers? Do we get better at our supply chain and our core processes? Or do we try and do all three and confuse the hell out of everyone? It's that clarity of purpose and focus is really critical.
Yeah, I guess I'm just currently reporting to the Chief Digital Officer, so it's interesting, and they're apart from the IT world, so it is definitely a different way of thinking, and there seems to be a movement more to Chief Digital Officers and Chief Technology Officers, so dividing that up, and the Digital Officer, as you're saying, is right there with the CEO. And making sure that those concerns are met. So yeah, good.
They're joined at the hip. You got a chance. You got a fighting chance to bring the organisation, all the different business units together, and provide a clear message to the IT group as well that this is really important to this business. And so the IT group need to respond, be agile, have the right level of engagement, collaboration around that as well. So I've been in environments where the CIO hasn't even been involved in the digital strategy. So, it's leads to a shadow IT group. So less than optimal, but that's the way the organisation is where their thinking is at. So it's opportunities. Okay, so I'll just bring this in for a landing in terms of the presentation. And so recommending, and I think to Christine's point about creating some visibility around your environment. And so a business capability model is a critical point guard about what capabilities are needed for the business. Understanding your processes, how you're structured, what your information technology looks like, how your applications are set up. I'll include the enterprise information model in here as well. There's some real baseline hooks in here that allow you to scope out your project and your agile and your digital responses. So I think, and you can talk through, I talked through here, RAG ratings, specific insights. And you got enough people, FTEs. Where are your cost base? Where are your risks in this particular environment? So what it just allows you to do is create insight. And with that insight, you can bring that together, process it, and understand the adjustments and the trade-offs that need to be made. So yeah, I think the model uses primarily a holistic overview to drive out those patterns and areas of interest. A little bit of a toolkit, arming you up with to have the conversations with the executives, and really powerful for understanding what's happening, what's not happening in your environment. So that's the presentation. We're going to load this up onto the LinkedIn site. So make sure that those who are not members of the LinkedIn site, make sure you are, so you can get access to that. Is there any other questions at this stage?
No, none. More comments about the changing role of CIOs and how they're moving more towards being CDOs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they really, from a technology perspective. Yeah. And especially now with COVID and digital and agile, all of these components are fairly squarely in the CIO space. So they need to be adopting the CEO perspectives to be able to glove kind of scenario.
I certainly had a chuckle when organizations started releasing digital transformation strategies. And having been in the industry for quite a while. I'm like, well, all my career we've been working on digital transformations. It's not something new. I think what's coming up is more, or at least the push is more around delivering great experiences to customers and employees as well. So that's what they actually mean when they're talking about digital. Certainly a topic for another session.
Absolutely. Good segue into the next segment, Heidi.
Thanks, Christine. Yeah, you set that up really well. Thank you very much, Andrew. That was really insightful, and I think really great topic for where a lot of industries are at right now. So we've got our next meeting on the 12th of August. So I was going to do a call for volunteers and for topics that people would like to share about or like to hear about. So does anyone, how do we want to do this? Has anyone got anything that they'd love to, that they've been working on that they'd love to share with us? Silence. Are there any particular topics? I mean, I'm quite interested in hearing more about more enterprise level change management and that kind of thing, but I don't know specifically.
Yeah, I had a topic around the impact of COVID-19 and the move towards the digital workplace. So we've moved from having to pretty much work in an office space, and there's our organisations have rapidly had to allow us to work from home and move from being in the office to move to outcome-based work. So that's what I've been working on a lot in recently, and it's placed a lot of impact on the IT environment, and in a good sense, a lot of people are using tools like Teams to chat, to co-author, to do all these things. So I think that's really, it's made digital and IT much more needed and important, but it's also brought the challenges that we've had to change the way we work and allow BYOD and mobile device management and those sort of things. So yeah, I'm happy to have a bit of a subject and a discussion on that, because there's been just incredible changes lately.
That sounds brilliant. And we've started bringing people back into the office last week, and there's been a trial of different for the social distancing, for having on and off desks every second one and these kinds of things. But it's weird, because when you're in the office, you end up spending most of your time on Zoom calls anyway. So it's like most of the people aren't there. So unless you have everyone in on the same day, it's quite bizarre. Yes, I think we're a long way to go on working that out with the value that we're trying
I think the biggest challenge is almost to come, where we start operating at a hybrid model, because I think companies can cope with everyone in the office or everyone at home, but I think they're really going to struggle with a bit of both. So I think from an enterprise architect point of view, I think it's a really interesting challenge.
So I find that really peculiar, because having worked for Rio Tinto in a global role, it was a luxury to ever have your whole team in the office in one location. So for me, it's just, business as usual, not something unusual that's happened. But there's certainly, lessons that I learned working in that global role around how do you actually incentivize people to complete their work and work together, even though they're working in different time zones.
Yeah, fascinating concepts there. I think there's a lot for companies that aren't used to it. I guess I was spoiled because I worked at Suncorp years ago when they used to do a lot of this. That was their differentiator, but definitely not now. So yeah, it's interesting space that's evolving quite quickly.
So was that a vote for Nigel to do the next presentation?
Yes.
Yep. All
yes.
Good. Yeah. I was just going to say, just to add to that, there was 4 people in the office yesterday in a massive office, open plan. We're all doing team calls the whole day. It just didn't work. We needed breakout areas. We needed these sort of things. It just doesn't work. And we're going to have half the office staff coming back on Teams and Zoom calls. So it's going to be crazy. But we're looking. So that's the new normal. So looking forward to it.
I guess there's you've got a lot of different personality types. So how do you cater for everyone? Because I'm an extrovert, but I'm actually really enjoying being at home now. I think there's a lot to be said for a physical buffer of being able to just focus on things without distractions. So yeah, it's a lot of psychology behind that, I'm sure.
Yeah, I don't miss commuting, that's for sure.
Oh, no. So I'll just share the screen again, the last points. Go in presentation mode. There we go. So we've got Christine's details there to stay in touch for the business designers tomorrow. So there was, yeah, I'd love to see some engagement on there, and also please include other people. The value in a lot of these, the content is really sharing and having a community based around this. So we'll be using the LinkedIn post for putting the design articles on there. So any of the reference articles and resources that you've seen today, we'll be sharing on there. Feel free to engage. So we want, it would be great for you to be able to bounce ideas. And really, I think through this time, part of it's group therapy, for me anyway, with a lot of the different groups that I'm part of, to get through these uncertain times. Where there's a lot of, and again, pardon the travel reference puns with all the turbulence. Yeah, we want to, please feel free. We'd love to hear from you if you've used, applied these techniques and how you went. So reach out when you need guidance as well. So yeah, please bring a friend to the next one. It's really great to have a really great cross section of skills and experiences. So I personally value that. I know some of the people here, but I'd love to extend my network and hear about a lot of the things that I don't already haven't already come into contact with. So please bring people with different skill sets or other people that would really benefit from having the community and the sharing experience. So the next meeting is on the 12th of August. So we'd love to see you there. Are there any final comments, questions? I can see some chats coming up. Are there any more questions that came up?
Thanks for hosting it, Heidi. We're always looking for volunteers to host as well, so that we're not overwhelming the audience with coaching EA. You know, we're grateful to have the opportunity to provide Zoom as a hosting platform, but by no means are we driving the agenda. So if someone would like to host as well next time, do drop us a line.
Great, well, thanks so much for your time, everyone. So we'll post up some comments on LinkedIn and on the group today. And yeah, we look forward to seeing you on the 12th of August, and reach out in the meantime. Please don't be a stranger.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
See ya.
Good job.
Good job, Andrew.